Today, we're going to be reacting to Joe Rogan explaining hunting to Russell Brand. Now, what's interesting about this is that I like both guys. I'm a fan of both guys. I subscribe to both guys. I watch both their content and I like them a lot. Now, Russell Brand, just so you know, is vegan. And obviously Joe Rogan is a hunter and has been one for a while now. I'm very curious to see how Russell reacts to Joe's opinion and Joe reacts to Russell giving his thoughts on hunting in general. So with that said, let's get into the video.
You should eat eggs though, man. You really should. You should eat some animal protein without, I mean, if you oppose the moral aspect of killing an animal, which I totally understand and appreciate. And that's what led me to become a hunter in the first place, is that I was really uncomfortable watching these animal rights videos of factory farming. I thought it was disgusting. I was like, I don't want to participate in this. Yeah.
That right there, I think Joe makes a really good point, and I think that's probably something that most hunters feel and can relate with. I think that we've all been there where when we start thinking about where our food comes from, it's obvious that if we can harvest it ourselves or kill the animal ourselves, morally, I think we feel as though it's better that we're the ones that do it rather than having someone else do it for us, as well as just contribute to the general meat industry. You know, especially if you're seeing videos that show animal cruelty and really showing animals not in the best conditions.
Yeah, it's reprehensible.
Hunting is a different thing, man. To me, hunting is this intense, it's very spiritual in a way. I mean, people don't get it because they see you celebrating when it's over, because it's very, very, very difficult to close in on a wild animal.
What are you hunting?
Mostly elk. Well, elk's my favorite for two reasons. One, it's very delicious, super nutritious. Also, if I shoot one elk, I can eat it for like 8 months.
What are you doing, freezing them, salting them?
Yeah, freezing them.
So you're out stalking an elk on the plains.
Yeah.
Where are you? Like near where you live? You just go out? Do you travel on bikes or something? How do you follow them?
Yeah, well, you do travel on bikes if you whitetail hunt. A lot of times you'll go into the woods with bikes because they don't leave a scent the way your feet do.
Interesting there. So a couple things. First and foremost, I like that Russell Brand, instead of just kind of acting like he's, you know, virtuous or having an opinion right away, instead he's asking questions. He wants to know more about what Joe does and where he goes hunting and how he goes hunting. To me, that right there off the bat, he gets big kudos from me, because I think that shows that he's really open-minded. He just wants to kind of understand what Joe does. And when Joe talks about bikes being used, I haven't heard it personally used for whitetail. I have heard it used for blacktail hunting. I have heard guys using it, especially if there's gated areas where you can't have a motor vehicle past that, you know, to get away from the crowd. I have heard of guys using mountain bikes quite frequently. I actually saw that quite a bit when I was in the Pacific Northwest. Guys do that. In fact, sometimes they'd even put a baby trailer on the back so that way they could, you know, get their elk, get their deer out, and just carry it all out using their mountain bike. So kind of interesting conversation here, but I do like that Russell Brand is very open to things, and he's just asking questions, trying to understand it a little bit more.
You know, and animals don't associate the sound of a bike the way they associate it with like the sound of stepping, bipedal hominids stepping towards
They've evolved, right? Bipedal.
Yeah, they see you on a bike, they don't even freak out as much.
Delightful. Never seen that
like,
before.
What's that?
Wow, my brain!
What are these things? Yeah.
So, elk, are they like herd animals? So you just see like a herd of them?
Yeah, you see a herd of them, and you try to figure out which way the wind's blowing, and you try to get close to them. Is this a video of us? Yeah, this is a video of us from...
what a beautiful place. I mean, I can see the harmony of nature.
Yeah, so that's an elk.
Now, the thing is with me, I see that elk there, and I sort of feel like a sort of, I've watched too much Disney. You know, like I see that elk and I feel like I'm Bambi, literally. You know, I don't have it. Like, is that early in the morning? You look tired. Not tired.
Might be late afternoon, actually.
So I think Russell Brand brings up a great point here, where it's kind of the Disney-fied version of what animals are. And this is something that we see quite honestly all around the world. It's not just him. It's something that we see here in the US. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look at the stories that happen in Yellowstone all the time, where tourists that aren't from the US try to approach buffalo or, you know, bears and stuff like that. They don't understand that these animals are wild, and sometimes they don't really understand how dangerous they are. But I do think that this is interesting, the way Russell Brand's kind of saying, I don't associate that the same way you do, Joe. And I think he's, being honest, which I appreciate.
Can you
I
tell
think that was
this?
late afternoon. Yeah.
Like, say, like, I from that position, I couldn't, like, I would love the game of being able to aim, because actually I've had to go down gun ranges. It turns out I'm a pretty good shot. It's nice to see that thing come back with like holes around its abdomen and its head.
Right.
I think satisfied. There, you've been dealt with, paper man. But like the elk, I couldn't. I've got too much empathy in me that I couldn't deal with the feeling of after it was shot.
That right there is the number one thing I feel like when I've talked to my friends and family members that are vegan or vegetarian, this is the biggest thing that they bring up, is the empathy for the animal. And I think this is one thing that hunters in general, when we're having these conversations with plant-based diet individuals, we need to understand. So when you have conversations with them, it should be talking about how they feel and what empathy they feel towards the animal, not just purely based on, hunting tradition. My dad hunted, my grandfather hunted, that's why I hunt. That doesn't really connect with them as much. As you can see right here, that's not what Russell Brand's concerned about. That's not what he thinks of immediately when he's having this conversation. So I'm curious to see how Joe reacts to this.
Like almost thinking about it, the sentimentality of it, I've sentimentalized it now. At least I don't eat meat and stuff like that, so it's not like I have all those feelings, but can handle it in a packaged, portioned off way. Yeah, it's just I feel too much like, that creature. So what in your head when you're doing it, when you're pulling the trigger, you're not having what's going on in your mind?
Good question.
Well, you only are hunting these mature animals that have already passed on their genes. You also are recognizing that if you're not killing these things, it's not like they're going to live forever.
Right.
They live a short life with a very violent death. It's either wolves or mountain lions or bears or something's going to take them out. Yeah. And what you're doing is essentially dipping your toe into the natural world. And I've heard the argument that, well, this is ridiculous because everyone can't do that. If everyone went out and hunted all the animals, there would be no animals left, which is true. But I'm not everyone. And so I don't,
Joe started well with this argument, but I feel like the end there was kind of weak. I felt like it wasn't the best argument to make at the end. I think where Joe could have went with this, I like the fact that he's talking about the fact that, yes, it's true. Animals in the real world do not have pleasant deaths. We know this as hunters. We're well aware of this. I like that Joe kind of started with that. Where I wish he kind of went with it a little bit more is talked about starvation would be a major factor with animals. And that's due to us as humans destroying this ecosystem and the balance of this ecosystem. If we don't work on controlling herds and populations so that we have proper herd health, that in the end, you end up with a lot of deer or a lot of elk that end up starving to death and not leading a healthy, happy life. Whereas having hunters be part of this ecosystem balances out in a much more natural way, the way it should be, which is we can have proper age range as well as dynamics. So started well, but I didn't care for the way he ended it, really.
Really use that if everyone did it argument.
It's a good argument because if you're encouraging people to hunt, it is kind of a good argument because it's not realistic. It's not sustainable. But the other thing to recognize,
you can encourage people to hunt because you also have to remember at a certain point in U.S. history, we had something around 50 million Americans that hunted. Currently, there's closer to 10 million right now. So I think that you can encourage people. I don't think every single person is going to be hunting. So I think if Joe's trying to make that point, like the entire United States is hunting, then yes, he's accurate in that sense.
Is that the reason why most of this wildlife exists in the first place? A lot of it was wiped out in the early 20th century.
True.
From what they call market hunting.
Yep.
In the late 19th century, early 20th century, they didn't have refrigeration, and it was hard to get food, and we didn't have the same sort of large scale agriculture that we have today. And so when someone would want meat, they would somebody would either have to hunt it for you, and you would go to the market and get that hunted food, or you would go out and do it yourself.
Yep.
And they basically wiped out most of the wildlife in North America to the point of extinction. Whitetail, deer, elk, they've been extirpated from the majority of their range in North America and only been replaced in a few other places. But the places where they've been replaced, it's all through money that was generated through hunting tags, all through billions and billions of dollars. There's a thing called the Robertson-Pickman, I think that's what it's called, Act, where 10%, if you buy hunting gear and equipment, 10% of that money goes to habitat restoration, making sure that rangers and forest people get funded. So there's the Fish and Game Department gets funded, and also population conservation, making sure that the populations are healthy, repopulating certain areas with elk and deer. And this has all been done through the money that's generated through hunting.
Great job, Joe. I think he did a awesome job right here. I kind of mentioned some of the things I hoped he'd talk about, and he did do that. It's a 10% to 11% depending on what you buy. It's not just hunting gear, it's also for fishing as well. It's firearm sales, it's ammunition, all of that goes to it. Not only does it create jobs for wildlife biologists that track such things as the species, but also invasive species such as various plants and stuff like that. But it also funds things like game wardens to protect these animals. There's a huge amount of money that is funded because of hunting in the United States. It also goes to help, obviously, public lands make sure that they stay public. And so I think that this is a great argument Joe's making. I would also probably add to that, beyond that, the amount of money that is generated through people traveling to go hunt, whether it be, local areas, hotels, small gas stations, mom and pop stores. There's a massive economy there that is also being generated through hunting.
Yeah, I can see that looking at my own feelings towards it, I can see that there's a potentially, I'm bringing a sentimentality to the idea of animals that's like anthropomorphic.
Yes.
Like I'm like, oh, you can't kill that. What about its babies?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm thinking about things like that. But what I live in a rural area in Britain where like hunting is normal and agriculture is normal. And I wouldn't get very far if I was sort of like, you can't shoot those pheasants. Look at their feathers. They're beautiful. Like it's not a helpful attitude. So whilst I in myself, I couldn't do that because it messes me up on a sort of feels like a very sort of deep, visceral level, but I feel that this is precisely the kind of territory where we have to look at acknowledging and tolerating difference between us. This is where I feel like the sort of these ossified, polarized positions between right and left are starting to take root. Because if someone like me who don't eat meat, don't eat animal products and wouldn't hunt for ethical reasons starts trying to impose on other people, no, you shouldn't hunt because of this, that, have you not watched Bambi? That's going to mean that people aren't able to explore who they are. I've let go of judging people around things that I don't agree with because I reckon I don't know everything. What I mean? This is about my morality, is about how I behave. And if people said to me, I'm thinking about going hunting, I'd go, well, these are my feelings about it. However, though, I just heard that hunting does contribute apparently to the survival of some species, and there is an argument that it's quite natural and indigenous, and it's probably a way of getting in contact with who we are originally as hunting people. It's an important part of our anthropological history, and possibly a lot of the condemnation of hunting is part of the rejection of who we used to be as we become overly civilized and more detached from what it is to be human, whether that's sacred or pragmatic. We don't know what human beings are anymore. We reject our own sexuality, we reject our own bodies, we reject, we're trying to turn ourselves into these sort of cyborgs, these emotionless, sexless, meaningless creatures. Where is our passion? Where is our connection with the sacred? They would go, hold on, I only asked you about hunting. When are you going to stop talking? Never. You gave me an in. I will pummel you with my belief system on all things. So I don't feel like that ain't where I get into judging people.
So at the end there, a lot to unpack from Russell. But I have to say, I feel as though this was a great conversation, and I saw a couple things there that I want to touch upon really quick before I end the video. One, I think Joe did a pretty good job of representing hunters and talking about the various ways that we contribute to the ecosystem, to conservation, as well as his general mindset when it comes to hunting. I think that he also did a good job of addressing certain elements that people probably just don't know about. Russell, on the other side, I would say, did a phenomenal job of being open, asking questions, wanting to understand. And there at the end, sure, yeah, he went on a little bit of a rant, but you still understand where his perspective is. And I think the fact that he has this openness and willingness to say, you know what, I don't agree with you, and I'm open to learning about your perspective on things, to me is huge. And I think that how civil this conversation was and how they could have a little bit of joking back and forth says a lot about who both of them are. I think that we need to have more conversations like this and have these moments where we just connect in the fact that we both come to the table with an open mind and realizing that I might learn something from this person that I never knew. So I really applaud both of them for this. I think this is a great video. I think this is a great example of what happens when people really want to learn about each other and really learn about each other's lifestyles, whether it be someone that's a hunter and into eating meat or someone that is not and that is vegan and that is more of a plant-based diet. So in general, I think it's a great clip. I think both guys had a awesome conversation. I wish it was a little bit longer, but in the end, I think it's a great example of how we can come together and just have great conversation. So with that said, as always, shoot straight and knock something down.